Good morning, everyone. Oh. Good morning, everyone. That's better. Thank you, Susan, for that introduction. I'd like to also thank Ivan and Aftercare and the Consortium Partners for inviting me here today to speak. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land on which we meet and their elders past and present. Also like to acknowledge the wisdom of lived experience, the wisdom that's come from the struggle and triumph of mental illness. But without that wisdom, we wouldn't be here today talking about recovery. We wouldn't even be able to think through that work without listening to this wisdom of what it takes to overcome. The things that I present today, although some of them may be from my own personal experiences that I've journeyed around my own mental illness, they're drawing upon a whole international collection of wisdom. That it's strange that you can be talking about something here in West Moreton and at the same time in Canada, someone with a lived experience will be talking about exactly the same thing and we've not met. So it speaks to this kind of innate wisdom that we all have about what it takes to overcome. So I sat and thought about what to title this because Susan has given us strict instructions to make it positive. And because we all know the negative stuff, so we don't want to dwell on this, and this is a day to launch a new project. So I thought about how can PIR West Moreton ensure that it's personally and professionally transformative. And it's not, this program doesn't need just to be about transformative for individuals. If it's done spectacularly well, it'll be transformative for our workforce. It'll be transformative for our sector. It'll be transformative for our community. And to take a wider perspective on this than just the individual. Not to forget the individual, but to take a wider perspective. I have a confession to make, and I've never made this publicly. Okay, I know this is being recorded, so I'll be brave and vulnerable and put it out there. When the Department of Health and the Commonwealth Government last year muted the concept of PIR, it's a very sad day for me. I kind of felt, oh my gosh, where are we going? Are we going backwards? Because the framework resembled something very similar that the United States had started in the 1970s. It was called the Community Living Program. And if you read what the Commonwealth Government had put out, it could be easily interpreted as more and more services wrapped around people's lives, entrapping them in their lives. And the danger of that is real. But there's also a great possibility to not turn it into that. And I'm working with a number of PIR consortiums around Australia that are daring to be different, and I believe West Moreton is also daring to be different, about ensuring it doesn't become a boulder to people's lives, but something that helps people transcend that and transform and live the life that we all deserve to live. So now I've gone from probably the greatest cynic about PIR to being a convert, because I see the possibilities in it for us. I see the potential, I see the creativity, if we dare to grab that. And that's what I want to really focus on today, that we dare to grab the creativity and what could be different. As Ivan was saying, this is not more of the same. A couple of years ago, I was asked to do a World Health Organization presentation on, is this a paradigm shift? Is the concept of recovery asking us to, have we really embraced a paradigm shift? And it invited me to look at what paradigm shift really was. And Thomas Kuhn coined the term paradigm shift. And when I looked at it, it made so much sense to me, because he was talking about, in order to be a paradigm shift, we have to give up old ways. We can't have a paradigm shift and hang on to existing ways and just add on a couple of other things. It fundamentally asks us to let go of ways that no longer are serving us. And in mental health, I think we use the word paradigm shift, but are we really letting go of old ways? And that's the challenge. And that takes courage for us to let go of that. PIR, I think, is a paradigm shift. I think it's fresh air, I think it's fresh blood for our sector. And so every day that we're thinking about, are we doing things the same way? Are we still holding on to old ways? Are we still holding on to ways that people have told us time and time again aren't helpful? Or are we daring to ask a different question? Are we daring to see it from a different perspective? I've got to thank Google Images my best friend. What is our if it's a paradigm shift, we have to acknowledge that we've got to start from a different position. We can't start from illness being a deficit. I ask many audiences that I have the privilege to speak with one question. I'll ask you here what you would think. The experience of serious mental illness, is it life-defeating for most people? Or is it life-transformative? Now, just don't think about your answer. Think about what your friends and family would say, what the general community would say. So who would think it's life-defeating? My life is over. I'm never going to be what I thought I was going to be. This is going to be the biggest, struggle that I've got. Can I see who would think it's life-defeating? Oh, come on. What about your friends and family? Yeah, I think that's the general myth out there. I think that is still a really current belief. And like if you look at the American version of this funding, that's what it was set on. It was set on that people will need support forever. And they will need this much support. And because if that support is taken away, they'll fall over. And the problem was they did, because no one saw the support as being a transformative support to help the person be able to self-right, self-manage, self-correct. Who of us thinks that the general population at this point in time, we went down into Ipswich Town General and asked them, the experience of mental illness is life transformative in a positive way. How many people do you think would be joining us and going, yeah, I believe that? So we've got some work to do. But first and foremost, we've got to believe in our heart. We've got to fundamentally believe that the experience of mental illness it's not necessarily a death sentence. When I was first diagnosed with a mental illness, I thought it was. I believed the myth that my life was over, and I lived that and it became a truth. When you look at the evidence about recovery, we haven't got time to look at it today, but homework to do, when you look at the evidence about recovery, you'll be surprised. Even when you look at recovery from schizophrenia, it's up around 68% of people have good recovery rates. And yet we're building services as if it's kind of like 0.5% of people have good recovery rates. So it asks us to start from a different perspective. I love Einstein's quote here, and this I think is relevant for us every day in this program. We can't solve problems by utilising the same kind of thinking we use to create them. So if we start by seeing our job is to prop someone up with a mental illness, we're going to have the same solutions that we've currently got. If we start by saying someone with a mental illness has capacity, but what might be missing is their opportunity to access resources and supports and things in the community, there's things that are stopping them, then we start from a different position. We start from an I can versus an I can't. This is the only technical diagram I'm going to show you today. And if people want a copy of this diagram, I'm happy to email it to you or give it to Aftercare to email out. This diagram, it looks a bit complex, but it's been built by leaders all around Queensland in a program that I've been running with Ivan's funding when he was at the Department of Communities called ROM. And it's about the paradigm shift. So let me explain this one-page recovery-based practice. If we start from the red side has a core belief that people with a mental illness, that they can't participate, they can't live in community. I'm just going to grab my glasses, can't read that. People diagnosed with mental illness have different needs and expectations to others. So and it's built on fear, it's built on kind of our professional training, it's built on expectations, it's built on power, it's built on funding, etc. If we build a system on that, these are the sorts of practices that we'll get. And there's a whole lot there, but most of them are external props to people's lives. It's what we call externally created recovery. Someone can create a good life for me. They can give me 2.4 friends. They can give me a house. They can make sure that I'm eating 3 meals a day. They can make sure I go out into the community. But internally, nothing has shifted. Nothing is shifted about my sense of self, my sense of self-management, my sense of self-direction, my sense of seeing myself as a citizen, my sense of hope for a real life. Artificially, it looks good. Internally, it's an illusion that recovery has happened. So I think a lot of services have been seduced into this. There is another way. And there are many services that are working really hard to try and create this. And this is what we call internally realised recovery. It's the fact that I recognise that I'm doing it, I'm powerful. And it starts from a different premise. It starts from supporting a person to live, love, work and play in their own community, despite the presence or absence of mental illness. So if we get sucked into that we've got to actually respond to the illness and not the person, we'll be practising from the red side. If we're thinking that the service responses are to support a person to live well in spite of, we'll be focusing on citizenship, self-mastery, self-management, lifelong learning, human rights and social justice. And these are the things that underpin practices around self-management, self-expertise, self-determination. It invites us to be, think about this stage. It invites workers and systems of care to take backstage positions and for people to be on stage in their own life. I ask people when I work with them about where are you in someone's life? Are you on stage or backstage? Someone commented to me that we're on stage and the person's still trying to buy a ticket to get into the auditorium. And I think that that's what we've got to change, is this position of who we see as the expert, who we see as needing to drive this process. We haven't got time to go into all of these, but one of the things I want to say is that there's not a right or wrong side. We will always get drawn to the red side. I get drawn to the red side. It's dominant. It's the thing that services over the last 200 years have been built upon. It will suck us in like we have insects into a light. It cannot but go there. What we need to build is a resistance and a resilience to being sucked to that side, to recognise that we're being pulled over there. Some of the leaders, when they've been developing this with me, they kind of go, it's a great supervision tool because I just showed the diagram and I go, oh yeah, I just got sucked into being on stage instead of backstage. Or I just got sucked into being service first instead of service last. So it's kind of like not beating ourselves up because we go there, but having the capacity to recognise it and then support the green side. We don't create the green side. It's natural. It's naturally occurring. The red side gets in its way. So it's how do we recognise that we can override the naturally occurring environments that we want to create for people? Short kind of comment on a very long kind of conversation that needs to happen amongst yourselves. I have a friend in the UK, Anne Markwick, who's a consultant. And she says to me, the problem that she sees with English services, and I dare say probably here in Australia and other parts of the world as well, is that we take up too much room in we take up too much space in people's living rooms, and we don't know when to leave. We are an artificial, services are artificial. People usually groan and throw something at me when I say that, because they think that I'm saying that services aren't necessary or services aren't relevant. Yes, we are relevant. And we are necessary, but we're not part of people's natural lives. And when we start to assume that we're part of the living room, we're part of that, we're actually saying we're here forever. So we need to have some really clear conversations and really clear questions about, are we taking up too little, too much space, and how do we know when it's time to leave? These are really important questions, and not to be the one-way moving truck that moves into someone's life. The danger is that many PIR consortiums that aren't thinking this question will inadvertently be in people's living rooms taking up residence. And we wonder why people struggle to get out the front door. I have a personal experience about this. In the last 6 weeks I've been fighting for my life in a hospital. And I just counted up before how many different professionals were in my life. I had 15 different types of professionals and probably 40 different personnel that were coming into my hospital room every single day. And did I need them? Yes, I did. I wouldn't be standing here if I didn't. So they had something vital They had life support for me. They had treatment for me that without it, I wouldn't be here. But there was something different about this team. This team saw me as a central part of it. They didn't have conversations about me without me. They saw that in order for me to get out the front door of the hospital, they needed to help me to be self-managing this. They needed me to become the expert. They needed to share their skill, their wisdom, their knowledge, their expertise with me so that I could be part of my treating team. There was a couple of grad nurses that had started when I was in hospital, and they said to me on my discharge, they said, "Oh my God, when we were learning about how to treat you, you were wanting to know as much as we were because, you were more interested in why are you doing that and how are you doing that and what's that one for? What do these results mean?" And I said to them, that's because when I leave, I'm not going to have you with me. I need to become the expert. And I think for PIR, this is a great analogy. If medical services can do service coordination that well, then we've got no excuse that we can't. And so I think about this as a team. I was working with the PIR consortium in Tasmania, and they drew this analogy. I got them to think about what's the analogy between you and the person and the community. And one group, they drew a picture. It was a baseball kind of team that I could only find a football one. And they said the person that's referred to PIR is the selector. The support facilitator is the coach that helps them and guides them in their selection of the team that works for them. Some of us will be benched sometimes because we don't have what's relevant right at that moment, and that's okay. Some of us will be on the team, and that will be a rotating team. But most important is how do we support the selector to choose the best team for them? I like the analogy because quite often we can inadvertently think that we're out there selecting the team and we just give it to the person. How different would it be if the person who's referred to PIR, we had the first question was, who's been the best supports for you in your life and who's got in your way? And then as PIR consortium members and workers, we kind of hear the people that have been really useful, and we learn from them about how they've been useful. We take note of the people that have been boulders or barriers, and we think about how can we enrol them in PIR as the client, that the organisation becomes the client of PIR, and the person becomes the coach in supporting them to be able to work for them better. Just a bit of a different way of seeing the world. It's about the environment. It's not about recovering someone. We cannot recover anyone. That's up to the person. But we can create an environment in which that is more likely to happen. I was working with a team, they were drawing a picture for me about what their vision for services were, and this one team drew a frog in a pond. And I'll leave on this conversation is that they talked to people about why this was their analogy for services. And they said, there's a Buddhist story that says this Buddhist man wanted to go and collect frogs. So he built a pond in his backyard and he went and found all the frogs out there. And he brought them to the pond and he put them in the pond. And he was very happy that he had all these frogs. And the next day when he woke up and he went out to his pond to see his frogs, there were no frogs. They'd all jumped away. They'd all gone. And he was very sad about this, that all the frogs had disappeared. And then he started to think about what did he do that wasn't helpful for the frogs. So he went out and he started to observe where frogs live and how they live and what actually makes them thrive. And he started to learn that the environment that he created wasn't conducive for frogs to live. So he created another environment, another pond, and he put the lily pads in and the reeds in, and he just concentrated on building the pond. He didn't worry about going and finding the frogs. And this pond was beautiful and it was rich. And when he woke up in the morning and he went out to his pond, the frogs came. And I think this analogy is when we concentrate on bringing people and sucking them into our services, we may have forgotten to look at the environment. Is the environment that we're creating something that's life-giving and people will say yes to and thrive within? To do this, we have to have courage, we have to be vulnerable, we have to dare. We have to dare to not follow the trodden path. And have you solved the problem yet? Our whole system is focused on not having problems. Embrace it, because that is where our learning is coming from. No, I might not have solved the problems, but I'm learning a lot. Thank you very much.